all and a warm welcome to AJT webinar. Welcome to our Navigating Our Future, Embracing Our New Wellness Lifestyle. Welcome back to a couple of new participants that I've seen, and welcome to new participants. Welcome. And with me, I really like to welcome the speakers that we have for today lining up. The topic of looking at creating sustainability, wellness in real estate development. Well, real estate development is a big business model that is always an ongoing thing. Everyone needs a roof above our head. Lifestyle is becoming more vibrant, more robust. We're all looking at not just brick and mortar. We're looking at more what creates sustainability in development today around us, especially in the region here in Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, and now Vietnam, even Cambodia. So I think it's very interesting to see what can be fit into creating sustainability. So before we move to our speakers, first I would like to thank this whole webinar for Swan & McCarran being one of our partners coming in as the sponsors for this event. Swan has been in the architectural business for years. They have been established in Singapore since 1892. Correct me if I'm wrong, Terence.
Right? That's correct.
92, and I believe you guys are coming out with a coffee table book about your architecture for all these years with your iconic buildings that you have built in Singapore, like the Goodwood Park, Raffles, and I believe you have done numerous buildings out of Singapore, like in Chongqing for hospitals under the Raffles, and in Singapore, the old Bangkok Court, my favorite, where you guys have turned it around to be a Raffles hospital. So that's going to be really promising to listen to Terence later in a few minutes of how he basically re-renovate and revitalize the whole Bangkok Court to a Raffles.
It wasn't me, and we didn't handle the Bangkok Court portion. Maybe I need to clarify that. So we're not responsible for your prawn noodles disappearing.
Okay, so without further ado, I would like to just showcase a little bit of PowerPoint here to give you a little key points of how to create sustainability in a building environment, in development, mixed use, hotel, whatever it is, it's with brick and mortar. So, thank you. Just give me a second. Okay. So, navigating the future in healthcare and wellness, there's always looking at any business that we are looking is sustaining it and making it weatherproof, especially in this condition. So here are some takeaway notes that I will just touch on. At the same time, you will hear a lot of it more in depth from our individual speakers. Well, I think when we talk about building, especially in this webinar today, we are looking at how we could enhance real estate property with wellness. And if you look at it, surprisingly, globally, there are in 62 countries, there are about like 4,322 projects, comprises about 583 million square feet that are certified with well building. Well, well building is something that you're looking at eco-friendliness, looking at environment friendly. Yeah? So future lies in sustainability. I always like to put a picture of the seafront. You know, what do you think, guys? I love it. And this is really at Padbury. You know, it's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, the future of real estate development. These are some keynotes that you can take note of, but don't worry, we will share it with you. The slides will be shared. The whole webinar will be basically recorded and shared with you later on. So I think in future of real estate, there's no matter what projects that one is keen to put on, there are many benefits to develop in eco-friendly projects. Then of course, when you do that, there are always governments in certain looking at climate change. I mean, I believe so. They might be also looking at tax rebates or tax incentive to it. This is another key factor in upfront costs. Of course, in our business that we do in AJT, doing a full turnkey in concept development, feasibility studies, implementation, many of our clients always would like to know what's the price. Isn't it, Arthur? Everybody will know what's the price, what's the upfront cost, what's my return. So this is one point that Arthur will be sharing a little bit more for you in depth, telling you what are the keynotes to be taken when you're looking at putting up a building of in Thailand or maybe around this region. Well, certifications. I think there are lots and lots of awards all around this business. So in creating sustainability in a building, earning great awards will be very good. Doing good benchmarking before you select an award that you want to be participating in. Creative awards, looking at building safety, many more. And it's always good to get a third-party certification. Well, this is another common misconception about real estate marketing. Well, many people that I've seen or I've worked with, they always like to move forward in doing the marketing pre-advanced before the piling work starts. But before that done, please, a very good keynote for you all to remember, please always look at your concept developing. That's very important because many of them develop the whole building. Then once they start marketing, they realize the market makes a different demographic change. Then the whole works come in terms of cost evaluation and all that will start to increase. So communication, promote your sustainability measures clearly, look at the long-term value. Well, this will be very interesting, repurpose and re-renovate. So as we all know today, properties are trying to scale down in terms of putting more greenfield. So what is there available? I think architects and investors are looking at more brownfield and existing buildings that one could basically relook, recalculating, measuring, looking at what kind of existing structure can be done, and looking into new development, taking advantage of prime location. I believe in Thailand, in Singapore, even in Malaysia, there's so many prime locations with old buildings up there, even to the extent of historical buildings that people are now using it and restoring it into lifestyle, mixed-use development, even to medical wellness for a certain purpose. So created added value to your projects. Well, build for the location. I think, well, many countries do provide certain tax rebates, Arthur, I believe so, or certain grants that are looking for programs. So I think government today, especially in this condition of economic crisis, I think many governments are still wanting the development of property still to go on. So governments may be more creative in coming and giving you more grants and programs for developers and investors and builders to look at. Well, that goes without saying, having everything today is all moving towards a smarter city, having things like more eco-friendly, new technology, IT. Well, that's one thing people are looking and building, looking at 5 years out, 10 years out. So basically technology and tools will be one of the very key factors to build your sustainability and buyers to consider looking into the properties. So market your project sustainability and eco-friendliness with the new lifestyle option of medical wellness. Now, so those are just keynotes that I think that it will be something good that one could really look at it and consider it very clearly before making any new projects up and coming. Now, let me bring in Terence. Terence is a person who has been in the architecture business for many years, and I would like to just give you his bio. Terence is with Swan & McCarron as an architect designer. He's also with the Singapore Board of Architects, who has been developing projects in Singapore and in the region for over 25 years. Terence works closely with the architectural and production team in various projects of different scale and complexity, and with a focus on healthcare. He is very passionate about harness and management of knowledge and resources of firm growth. And he's deeply interested in how people and the organization that they form acquire, retain shares, and build upon collective knowledge and endure always to bring about organization growth and development and proceeds. Terence, we welcome you and we thank you for being here today. And please share your inside story of how to build sustainability in real estate. Thank you, Terence.
Thank you for the introduction, Nick. I'd like to share my screen right now. Okay. Can you guys see what's on the screen? Has it come up? So in preparing for today's talk, okay, I looked at some of what I thought were the trends and drivers in city planning, okay, and I also looked at what I thought were some of the trends and drivers driving healthcare planning, okay, in the modern city. And quite to my surprise, curiously, a lot of the trends and drivers were actually the same, overlapping, okay. I suppose not really all that surprising if you can consider that a healthcare building is actually a microcosm of the city, okay. So the topic of my talk actually is about some of these shared trends and drivers that affect both city planning as well as healthcare planning in the city. And there's a great degree of overlap, and one of the key drivers is actually sustainability. So I'm going to be talking about that as well. All right. So I'll just take you to the next slide there. Now, the trends and drivers that I listed, which were common to both urban planning and healthcare planning, the first one, I think the major one really, is decentralization. There's also the growing influence of lifestyle, sustainability, as we mentioned, okay, the greening of the built form, and also something that's particularly relevant to the whole world today, okay, pandemic and mass casualty incidents, or MCI preparedness. Okay. Now, the thing about all of these trends and drivers is that there's a great deal of overlap among them, and I think you'll also see that some of the things that I'll be talking about will also overlap a fair bit with some of the things that the other speakers today are going to be talking about. Okay, so I'll just go right into it. Okay, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is actually decentralization, and in decentralization within the context of city planning, within the context of urban planning, I think sometimes gets mixed up a little bit. I think in the past, decentralization, people used to think about, oh, we need to centralize the business district, you know, and then we'll decentralize everything that's not business and we'll have residential outside, you know, kind of like the hub and spoke kind of arrangement within the city. But the trend is now that we're moving away from that. And the key impetus, I think, behind this movement really is sustainability, because it makes no sense for us to have people living far away from where they're working within the city, and then having large groups of people traveling in all towards one destination at one particular peak hour, working there for 8-9 hours, and then traveling back again. It imposes enormous pressures on the transport infrastructure. So the trend now is actually to decentralize, not in the old sense of the word, but to decentralize in the sense of diffusing the functions within the city, so that we don't have a single CBD anymore, but we have, say, several central business districts. Okay, that's kind of what Singapore is doing right now. We're starting another one in Jurong, in the west of the island. Okay, and we're also trying to incorporate more residential within the city center. Okay, more recreational space within the city center, and we're moving away from all of these single-use ghettos. Now, this is something that's actually shared with healthcare planning as well, because I think underlying the modern conception of the hospital and the healthcare space is that non-acute facilities really don't need to be co-located with your acute care hospital anymore. All right, there are numerous advantages to co-locating your non-acute facilities, small-scale inpatients, things like chronic care, day surgeries, step-down care, okay, within the community, closer to where people live, okay, for many, many reasons. You don't want people to have to travel very far for things that they may need to access healthcare needs that they might have to avail themselves of frequently, things like chronic care, okay, or elder care, for example, or elder follow-up, things like that. There's also the concept of micro-hospitals, which I think Dr. Nam will be talking about a little bit more in the talk later on. Okay, so what we're seeing more and more of is the housing of non-acute facilities, healthcare facilities within the community, within residential areas, as part of a, say, a residential complex, as part of, say, maybe a commercial center, a shopping center, stuff like that. Okay, moving it out into the community and diffusing that away from the one giant healthcare hospital behemoth that you have, you know, in the central location. Then we're moving away from that. All right. So what we're going to see then with this is that you minimize large groups of people moving, you know, toward one particular destination at one particular time of the day. Okay, whether it's a hospital or whether it's your central business district. Now that overlaps with sustainability because it takes pressure off of transport infrastructure, but it also reduces the likelihood that you have large groups of people, all packed into your trains, for example, which is precisely the sort of thing that we want to avoid during a pandemic, as we're seeing right now. So this also translates into savings on the long commute times, because if time is money, then people spend less time on transport and they can spend more time at the desk, for example, or on the job. Okay. You also have savings in terms of the acute healthcare real estate, because we've done, not we ourselves, but I think the figures been bandied about in Singapore. Healthcare, acute hospital real estate is hugely expensive, about 1 million Singapore dollars per acute bed. And one way to actually bring that down is to move all of your non-acute facilities offsite, elsewhere. Say, for example, your sports services, your offices, okay, your procurement. All those could be moved to a different building, to a separate section of the city, for example. What that does mean, though, is that your hospital, if these facilities and these functions are still tied back to the hospital, you do need infrastructure to be very, very robust, your IT infrastructure. Okay, and with the city also becoming more diffuse in its function, IT infrastructure is also going to be critical in the imagining of the new city. Okay, with more and more people working remotely. This obviously overlaps with pandemic preparedness. Okay, as we have more and more people working from home during the current COVID situation. I think this is going to feature more and more among the considerations for city planning and also for healthcare planning. Okay? I'd like to move on to the next trend that we're talking about. This one is lifestyle and the influence of lifestyle factors on urban planning and also on healthcare planning. Okay? Cities are now being planned, as we've spoken about, to allow inhabitants to live and work and play in place. Okay, so we don't want to see people working in one place and then having to travel very far to get back to their homes after that work day. With this in mind, there should be more recreational and leisure activity spaces being planned all across the city. All right, and this in turn feeds into and overlaps with one of the trends that is also influencing how we plan healthcare spaces within the city, because how you live influences your health outcomes later. Okay, so with more, say, recreational facilities woven into the fabric of the city, we'll get to see more opportunities for healthcare spaces to be co-located, maybe with sports and recreation spaces, things like that. All right. So the trend is really to discourage living apart in a distance from your workplace. All right. I think a certain amount of traveling and commuting is going to be inevitable. Right, but I think people want to mix this up and not make it so much the old model of the hub and spoke anymore. Okay? And with health and wellness facilities co-located in the community, you're also going to see more opportunities for co-locating this together with green spaces and recreational spaces. All right, that takes me into the next trend, which is also one of the core themes for this talk today, which is sustainability. Sustainability really is, I think, the one of the driving forces behind why we're trying to decentralize the city. I think in cities all across the world. If you think about it, if you drive a car to work, you park the car, you work, and then you drive the car back. Okay, the car itself is only used for a short period of time, but we need to put in so much transport infrastructure just to cater to all of the people, driving to work back and forth. So one of the ways to deal with that is to actually reduce the amount of commute. Okay, and also to increase public infrastructure like your rail transport and things like that. Okay, so it does translate into savings. Okay, when we go car light. Okay, because you can save on the car heavy infrastructure. In terms of healthcare planning, also environmental sustainability features in very strongly in savings on energy. Okay, because if you co-locate a lot of your non-acute facilities off site, then you don't have to overlap so much with a lot of the very energy intensive services and utilities within your hospital building, for example. Okay, there are times when you have to tap off an existing system and it's set up to a higher degree of efficiency, or with greater backup and things like that. So it all translates into greater costs to your project, and you don't need to do that if all you're creating really is like an office space to support the hospital. And if you co-locate that elsewhere within a dedicated office facility, but with good IT infrastructure and links, that translates into savings as well. Okay. Now, there's something that somebody once said, the next factor, the greenest building is one already built, okay? So we talk about recycling a lot, and there's something that, you know, we can consider in the city of the future, which is how can we recycle our buildings as well? You know, instead of tearing down everything, how can you incorporate new facilities, new functions within an existing building? Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that later on when I show you one of the projects that we handled here in Singapore. So in terms of healthcare planning, okay, designing flexibility into healthcare buildings allows flexible responses to outbreaks and changing technologies as well. Okay, this overlaps with obviously with pandemics. Okay, but you know, as technologies change as well, if we can make sure that we design with sustainability with the longer term in mind, we reduce the need to be too interventionist when we go to make the necessary changes to cope with, say, new outbreaks or new technologies within the existing building, and we factor that into our early planning. Okay, it does mean a little bit of initial thinking and a little bit of initial costs, perhaps. Okay, but I think it pays for itself in the long run. Okay. Now, there's one trend that's also very much evident in places like Singapore, okay, which is greening, introducing more green into the city and into healthcare buildings. Okay. This overlaps with sustainability because if you have a lot of green in your building, it does reduce the need for air conditioning if the greening is planned to help shield the building from solar heat gain in a tropical country like Singapore. Okay. But when you green a healthcare building, for example, spaces like naturally ventilated green lobbies or sky terraces, things like that, which could double up as waiting lobbies, for example, okay, they save on your air conditioning costs, okay, and also they overlap with pandemic preparedness because they are easily converted for spaces like triage outside of your main healthcare space, right? So things like that's another trend which overlaps with sustainability a bit. And that is a trend which I would like to talk about also on the next slide, which is actually the greening of the city and the greening of especially healthcare buildings. Okay. I think it's a bit of a truism that green spaces for recreation enhance, create relief, but they also enhance the value of the surrounding real estate if they're properly handled. Okay. If it's a healthcare building and you introduce green spaces, it's something that's been documented for a long, long time. Their research proven to promote healing because there are healing properties to being in close contact with nature. So more and more we're seeing healthcare buildings incorporate gardens, green terraces, planting, places where the more mobile patients can go, spend a bit of time in nature. Okay, it actually promotes healing. It cuts down on recuperation time. Okay, now there are issues when you introduce spaces like this in an acute hospital. Okay, because if you have things like soil shipped in, okay, if they require fertilization, then you've got to be careful about things like infection control, pathogens, pests. All right, but if we're co-locating more and more healthcare spaces, the less acute ones in the community, then there's more opportunity to co-locate them with green spaces, even within the building, right next to your building, for example, right above your building. Okay, you wouldn't want, for example, to have like say a sky terrace roof garden directly on top of your operating theatre in an acute hospital, but you could potentially do that, say, on top of a wellness clinic, say, or you could co-locate it, you know, within the garden, that sort of thing. So we've already spoken about how greenery can help reduce solar heat gain. Okay, obviously that overlaps with sustainability. All right, so I won't talk too much about that. But courtyards and gardens also provide easily convertible space, okay, which are extremely useful during pandemics and MCIs. Okay, mass casualty incidents for places like decon and also for triage. We're seeing that more and more. Okay, so this is one way to work that into your planning of your buildings without actually detracting from it. Okay, and in fact adding value to the building, in my opinion. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so the last factor I identified, very relevant to the times that we're living in right now, which is preparedness for pandemics and mass casualty incidents, or MCIs. Okay. After SARS, after H1N1, after MERS-CoV, and now, you know, in COVID, time of COVID, I think more and more of these factors getting prepared for the next one, the next big one, because I'm not even sure that COVID is the big one, is going to factor into how we plan our city, how we plan healthcare buildings. Okay. So when you decentralize your functions within the city, you reduce the crowds that pack into your trains every day, into your buses every day as well. And in that way, you prepare better, I think, for pandemics. But when you work this kind of preparedness into your healthcare building, for example, what we need to think about, okay, are other factors as well. So we need to think about flexibility, ease of conversion. Okay, so that's where open air spaces like gardens and terraces becoming useful. We need to think about, say, non-acute spaces. Okay, can they be converted, say, to isolation quickly, right? Can we have healthcare spaces that are located within the community converted quickly, and then if we need to ring fence that particular precinct, for example, then we keep everything within that precinct? There's something else to consider. Lots and lots of very interesting ideas that this particular pandemic is throwing up. I think after we're done with COVID, okay, everybody's got to take a long, hard look at how we plan our healthcare spaces, how we plan spaces within the city as well. All right. So one of the things that we've noticed since the time of SARS, is that you do need more space in front of your building, okay, and you do need things. You need to be sure that your filtration systems are up to scratch to deal with whatever the threat is, if it's a pandemic. Okay. Now, if we're talking about recycling buildings and stuff like that, this will have an impact on the floor to floor. Okay, so we can do it for some buildings, we can't. It's just exciting times. The way we design is going to be changing moving forward, in my opinion, as well. Okay, so I've spoken about the 5 overlapping factors and trends and drivers. I think driving, healthcare planning and also city planning. Now I'd like to just talk about one of the projects that Swan & McLaren has actually handled in Singapore. Now, I wasn't directly a member of the team, okay, but they briefed me, okay, so I'm going to be talking about it. And this was actually an extension to the existing Raffles Hotel. Okay, that's the tower that we did, the blue-green tower that you can see there. And the Raffles Hospital that you see on the left, we didn't actually do, but we were hired by the same client to actually put in an extension. And that extension actually comprised, quite interestingly, non-acute facilities, okay, support clinics, things like children's clinic, aesthetics, derma, endoscopy, day surgery, breast mammography. This actually is related to the points that I was trying to make earlier, in that these are functions which do not necessarily have to be co-located with an acute hospital. In this project, it was, okay, they joined it up with the existing acute hospital, and there were some issues, okay. But if you can see the slide over there on the screen, our project actually was the bit that's bounded with the red dashed line over there, and the L shape that's beyond that actually was the existing hospital, which in turn was actually converted from an office or commercial hospital. Okay, so these are facilities, lifestyle and wellness spaces, which will be increasingly co-located in residential, commercial, and community areas within the city. And in the case of the Raffles Hospital extension, it actually is sitting within a commercial, but also not, within walking distance from a residential area. These are prime examples of things that you can consider when you want to place healthcare and wellness spaces within the city. Okay. Now, I mentioned that the tower extension, housing all of these mostly non-acute facilities, actually was co-located right next to the acute Raffles Hospital. That's the shorter block on the left over there. What was notable about that project, we didn't actually handle it directly, okay, but what was notable about it was that they recycled the frame, the structural frame of the existing Blanco court, which I think was an office and commercial building. Now, when you do that, there are issues. They had to shoehorn a lot of acute facilities into that existing skeletal frame, okay? And for spaces like OTs, operating theatres, surgeries, and things like that, there's a need for higher floor-to-floor heights. So what I think was actually done is they actually had to remove a floor. So if you look at the elevation, okay, the floor line is there, but within they actually removed the beams, and the columns go up 2 stories instead. So they created an extra floor-to-floor height. The issue that Swan & McLaren actually faced was that when we went to put in our tower, and we had to then match the levels of the existing acute building, okay. And thus you see there were ramps and things like that. And in a healthcare building, you want to be careful about changes in level, because people are pushing trolleys and things all over the place for supplies, or sometimes trolleys with patients, things like that. Okay, and you'll have people in wheelchairs as well. So changes in level are pretty difficult to deal with. And here, because they were co-located, that issue cropped up. Okay, it's not something that will actually crop up if the non-acute spaces were, say, housed within other facilities in other locations, decentralized. All right. So we spoke about greening, okay, and our building, our extension, was originally planned to have even more green than it actually has right now. We have the sky terraces, we have the sky gardens, we have a lot of green all around, but originally we planned it to have green even going up the facade, as you can see in that rendering over there. I think for various reasons, we had to scale some of that back, okay, but the building, as you can see from the photographs, is still pretty green, tapping into the idea that, green spaces are actually healing for patients. Okay. So here are some of the transitional spaces, the spaces in front of the building. These photographs were obviously taken before the time of COVID, but these are exactly the kinds of spaces that would become useful during a pandemic when you have to set up like screening areas and perhaps even like temporary isolation areas and stuff like that. So if you have more spaces, more healthcare spaces within the city, there'll be more need for spaces like these as well, co-located with those healthcare spaces, and there will be more use for them actually during the pandemic. So in summary, I've identified 5 trends and drivers affecting both urban planning and healthcare planning. I think we will see more health and lifestyle and wellness spaces co-located within city communities. And non-acute facilities will no longer need to be tethered to acute hospital space. I think we will see more lifestyle management space becoming a more important component of healthcare and wellness. Sustainability is critical, crucial moving forward, no matter what kind of building we're planning. The greening of buildings in cities, especially healthcare buildings, is going to be really, really important. And I think more and more we're seeing that pandemic and MCI preparedness, mass casualty incident preparedness, will continue to influence planning decisions all across the board. Okay. So I'm not going to take any questions right now, but I think there'll be a Q&A later on. So thank you very much. That's basically the talk that I have for you right now.
Thank you, Terence. Wow, you really did a very full study on what you're presenting today. I think it's really excellent. But like I say, I miss the Bianco court, but I love the Raffles. The Raffles setup is beautiful. I've been there. I've been using them, and always I'm back home in Singapore. The healthcare system there is fantastic. It's easy, it's accessible, and it's bright. And the green in Raffles is really excellent. Really, thank you, Terence. Well, please, when you all have any questions for Terence, please fill in your questions in the Q&A box, and we will pick it from there right after all the speakers. Now, looking at building, now we bring in the money man. They're basically going to tell us a little bit more in depth of what and how we should be spending our money. Arthur heads a private equity fund, raising site of Asia Plus business within 30 years. Experience working in the financial sector in Thailand, principally in Barings Securities and Asia Plus. Arthur identifies private Thai business. Arthur, I hope you're hoping to help us as well.
Yes.
That is seeking growth funds typically from private equity funds. Sectors of interest are wellness, healthcare, customers, brand, leisure, concepts, and in the post-COVID business world, there will be opportunities, investments, and may be available under normal circumstances. So I'll pass the mic over to the money man to basically share with us more in depth about funds and equities and investment. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you, Anthony. So I'm going to, I'm not a designer or an architect, but I'm going to talk through basically wearing my investor hat or investment hat. Just on Asia Plus, we are sort of full suite financial services or a listed company. We, on my particular side, I work on private equity, not on venture capital, but private equity, as Anthony said, identifying growth Thai companies in various sectors. I'm lucky enough to be able to work on the companies and the sectors I like, and then basically finding the best fund for that particular business. This is typically before an IPO in 3 to 7 years' time. Okay. So I think any of us really knew what V-shape or U-shape recoveries were. I would put this into glass half full or glass half empty. So I think that in terms of investors who are looking at a V-shape recovery post-COVID, they are selectively putting their funds to work. and they feel that if they wait too long, that they're going to miss good buying opportunities. Frankly, I think there are more people who are more conservative, would fall into the U-shaped recovery group, and certainly the investors that I work with feel that things will get increasingly negative, or the environment will be difficult for the rest of this year, and there will be a recovery next year, second half of next year. But they believe, these type of investors believe that the best buying opportunities will occur actually in 2021, and therefore they're keeping their powder dry. In terms of distress, I would say that distress levels would be 50% below 2019 prices in terms of residential sales and hotels, hotel properties. We are working on two large projects in Bangkok at the moment, which are brownfield existing buildings which are being repurposed. And I would say, again, it's not rocket science, but property developers and owners of the hotels are in the eye of the storm, and I'm afraid it's inevitable that a number will not survive. So in terms of property market threats, from what I see developers are optimistically hoping for the best rather than planning for the worst. I think they would definitely, as owners of hotels and of property development companies, believe that and hoping for a quick V-shaped recovery. Having said that, I think there is, again, this is my view on Bangkok, and it may be similar to your own particular locations overseas, but there is an oversupply of upper-end residential properties in Bangkok, likewise in hotels. Liquidity is very tight. Asia Plus is one of the largest bond underwriters in Bangkok, and we are seeing very limited demand for property development bonds, i.e. developers who are looking to refinance bonds which are maturing the next 6 or 12 months. And that's going to be an issue. Banks, we know, have reduced lending exposure to the property sector and also to hotels. Residential prices in Bangkok have already traded 50% below 2019 asking prices. So basically, that marks a distressed level. There is a clearing at 50% below last year's prices. In terms of those of you in Thailand, we're talking about residential property that was 300,000 to 350,000 baht per square meter, selling inventory, developers selling inventory at half that price, 150,000 baht per square meter. If you take that calculation in terms of where the clearing price is and developers' cost of land that they've been acquiring over the last 2 years, then it is unfeasible to develop many projects today. And that is a problem because those developers have borrowed money to develop their land, but they're unable to sell. And obviously banks are also asking for high levels of deposits from buyers, and that's obviously not happening at the moment. And the other prop in the property market and hotel market over the last 3, 4, 5 years, particularly the last 2 years with residential, there have been many foreign travelers who've come to Thailand, fallen in love with the country, particularly from China, North Asia, limited from Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, but mostly from China, who've been buyers of residential property, high-end and middle-end in Bangkok. And obviously all that particular part of the market has disappeared. So I think one has to think out of the box. There is a definition of insanity by Albert Einstein, which I'm sure you all know. Definition being, if you keep on doing the same thing over and over again, and you expect the same result, or you're expecting a different result, then that is difficult to achieve. So I think one needs to think out of the box. So in terms of this discussion today, the investment side and property development, I think you need to integrate wellness and healthcare design into a property development, either hotel or residential. And I think that there is a move toward people not crisscrossing cities. I know it's very difficult, but Bangkok, we have BTS and the underground, but there is certainly a move for people to stay in certain pockets of the city, again, with social distancing. And I think that the developments which will work very well in the future will be those that which have a mixed use, say hotel, residential, retail, maybe exhibition spaces, and people are basically living and enjoying their life in that particular part of the city. So those are the types of development that we are looking at Asia Plus. And I think the other important thing is to integrate technology into wellness. So where are the opportunities? So this is where I say you can call me a canary in the mine, but this is where we are working hard, and that we are looking at brownfield, not greenfield. So in other words, we're looking at projects where investors are going to reposition and renovate older buildings, commercial buildings, hotels, retail, office, and also projects which are old and functioning, where they need renovation, and also projects where construction has stalled. Freehold is what absolutely everyone wants. Over the last 2 or 3 years in Bangkok, we've seen people or developers moving, particularly in Rat Damri, which is off Wireless Road, where there's very limited freehold land, developing leasehold properties, residential. That is almost impossible today. I think you're going to see shorter development cycles of between 1 and 2 years. And obviously it takes, if you're going to do a renovation of a hotel, 12 months, 18 months. Likewise, a renovation of an office building, which we've been involved in before with an investor. You can be in and out of that within 12, 18, 24 months. And I think there are obviously some landmark developments in Bangkok, which have taken 5, 6, 7 years. If you develop over a longer period of time, things can change, not only the economy, but also your buyers' personal circumstances in terms of moving around or their family circumstances. So shorter development cycles, I think you're going to see that very much as an emphasis. You're going to see, again, I remember in the last financial crisis, people wanting to buy land and development or buildings in capital cities rather than resort locations. Resort locations rely on vacation buyers. People are buying for a second home. And frankly, the real buying is in capital cities and people for their own use for residential. I think there is also certainly opportunity in scalable medical wellness business models, IV therapy. And I see a crossover between wellness and hospitality. I think there's a nice catchy phrase there, you can call it wellity. And what I call urban wellness retreats. In Thailand, in Asia, we see a number, not many, frankly, but a number of wellness retreats which are in resort locations. I don't see why developers haven't developed urban wellness retreats, and I see that being very much a key part of the redevelopment and renovation of existing properties in Bangkok. Okay, I do like wellness and preventative healthcare, and these are the sort of things which I have seen. I think there's a move towards smaller clinics rather than hospitals. Unfortunately, with COVID, there is the view that hospitals are full of sick people. And for those of you who know the Bumragrads and the BDMS of this world, there are a lot of people in those hospitals. I mean, they're incredibly high value and they operate extremely well. But where I come from in Europe many, many years ago, people would go to a family doctor, they would go to a clinic, they'd find out what was wrong with you, and then if you needed to go to a hospital, then they would send you to a hospital. So there is things you can do going to a smaller clinic, and I see that as a trend. I see also people being aware that they should be spending time and effort in improving their lifestyle, because at the end of the day, if you don't do that, then you're going to have long-term medical costs, and whether it's cancer or other things which can be prevented by changing one's lifestyle today. Immunity, I think, is very important. Everyone is talking about that. My son, my daughter, young people, they're looking to boost their immunity through exercise, regular exercise, through better nutrition, through deep sleep. I've learned that deep sleep is where you actually regenerating your immune cells. So important to have deep sleep. I also see, and we worked on and made an investment with one of our clients a couple of years ago. The new word for it is behavioral care. Behavioral care clinics addressing addiction to drugs, alcohol, addiction to internet. We all know is a problem, to mobile telephones. And I think, unfortunately, out of the post-COVID world, you're going to see more mental health issues. And I think mental health, wellness, behavioral care is going to be something which we have to deal with more frequently in the future. Senior living communities, I'm seeing interest in that. Thailand will become an age society in 2021. And what are called empty nesters, senior living, age society, they have money to spend on themselves, basically. Everyone is waiting in Thailand for someone to do it and then to fail. So we have not seen a good senior living community of any size. And when I say size, we're talking about a community of 1,000+ people. Because the key with a senior living community is that the people who live there dictate how they want to live, right? It's all very well giving them programs, but at the end of the day, they need to seize the opportunity and to drive the programs within their community. And to do that, you need to have a village square, you need to have all the local facilities apart from sport, but you need people to talk to each other and to drive what programs they want to achieve. I also see a lot of opportunity in health tech, telemedicine, fitness tracking, something I've been looking at recently called DNA Nudge, which is out of the UK, where they have developed an app where you put on your wrist, and DNA Nudge themselves have worked with food producers, and where you can then go into a Tesco Lotus, wherever it is, wherever you live, and then take something off a shelf, and then you can go onto a little thing on the package, put your app on your wrist next to it, and it will tell you whether that particular food is compatible to your physical status at that point in time. It'll flash green or red, which I think is that sort of thing is going to get more prevalent. And I think also health supplements and IV therapy is another area I see where people are going to want to invest more in the future. So in terms of wellness scalability, there are issues from, again, putting on my investment hat. A lot of investors wanting to invest in healthcare and in wellness-related healthcare. The problem is that there are a limited amount of operational wellness retreats in Asia, number one. 2, 95% of these retreats are what I call single-owner properties with a low key count. And for whatever reason, the owners have been unable to scale up their venues by adding venue 2, venue 3, venue 4, for 2 reasons I see. One is because they have limited management resources to scale up. And secondly, they're very concerned about damaging the brand. So they're very successful in their single property. Can they grow that into another location? And if it doesn't go well, then that damages the brand. That is a problem. Because it's a fragmented market in wellness, then private equity funds have difficulty putting enough money to work into that sector. So the funds we typically work with want to put $50, $60, $100 million to work, and very, very difficult to do that when you have such a fragmented, low key count wellness retreat. So there's an opportunity out there for a party to, my last point, to divide it into what I call propco and opco. So you have a fund with a criteria to invest in the underlying property, and then you have a separate vehicle which is investing in the brand itself, and which generates the management revenue. So that is, I think, that is the way to get around this problem.
Yeah.
And then my last slide, really, the general criteria that I've seen, not necessarily for wellness, but it's across all brands and all businesses. So the funds we're working with, they're looking to invest in businesses with a good track record, and frankly speaking, which were already performing well pre-COVID. I mean, the one sector that was, we all know, has been underperforming and had problems pre-COVID is retail. and obviously there's continued problems with that. So companies that have a good track record operating well, I think the vendors and the buyers, there needs to be a realistic pricing on the businesses which potentially are looking for new investment. The way we're looking at it is to basically look at January and February when their businesses were open, look at so actual numbers of this year, and then for the business, the time when the businesses were closed, so from March, April, May, June, you look at what the business was doing last year, and then you take a forecast the rest of 2020 post-COVID, and then you come up with a reasonable number. No one believes that COVID is with us forever, and no one wants to be taken advantage of. So I think there's a compromise between buyer and seller. I also see companies that are in good shape, mid-sized companies who are looking to make acquisitions. So acquisitions of companies or businesses, even their parent, like we're working on a few like that, where they can grow by acquisition rather than by organic growth. And if you have a good business with good management, with a good track record, there is money available for that type of business to grow, to buy something which is larger and perhaps not performing quite as well. And then the other area, I think, which is what everyone is always asking about, how much e-commerce you have in your business. So in terms of companies which were providing lip service to e-commerce maybe a year or two or 2 years ago, might have been 5 or 10% of their business overall. Some of these businesses are now doing quite well, even during closure, where 50, 60, 70% of their business is now coming from e-commerce. And even when in post-COVID, when the markets open up again, e-commerce will be a substantial part of their business going forward. So I think investment in e-commerce, I think it's a no-brainer, is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. Wow. Very interesting in knowing how to basically put up a building, make sure that it's sustained, and make sure there's ongoing blood flow to make sure business is always at its peak. Well, the next speaker is a friend and a colleague who I've been working for many years. He is our ex-CEO of Bamurat International in Bangkok, also a medical director. And Dr. Nam has just got back from Indonesia, whereby he was also managing a group in the OMI Health Group. And basically now he's moving forward to something more adventuring and something more futuristic and something fantastic to Singapore with Ernst & Young as a partner. Dr. Nam, I wish you all the best and all the success. And thank you for being here to share us your insight about sustainability in medical care.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Very happy to be here. Today was meant to be my first day of work in Singapore, but obviously the restrictions haven't been lifted yet. So I just am very happy to be able to make the webinar today. So today I just wanted to expand on what Terence and Arthur have been speaking about, and that's the shifting trend in medical care from the traditional large multiple hundred beds hospital to more ambulatory care, outpatient facilities in the community. Share my observations over the past decade or so as a clinician and also a hospital administrator, reasons behind this, possible reasons behind this, and also specific examples of things that have happened recently and the trend towards the future. So some of the reasons why healthcare providers are moving away from the traditional large hospital, multi-function facilities into more specific ambulatory facilities, single purpose in the community. Obviously, the first one would be cost. It's much cheaper to put up an outpatient clinic or freestanding emergency room than a fully fledged hospital. And hence the cost to the consumer or the patient will be less as well. Secondly, the patient expectations. Patients nowadays don't really want to go to a large hospital, get lost in the myriad of different departments and facilities. They just want to go specifically for a purpose, be seen very quickly, have easy access, and then have a very short visit time and turnaround time. The third point, competition. Large healthcare providers can really expand their reach to outreach programs by having specific ambulatory care facilities in their designated catchment areas and perhaps their competitors' catchment areas, and really plant their flag and have a foot in the door of potential catchment areas by having these smaller standalone facilities, some examples of which we'll go through. The fourth one is an interesting point, partnering with physician group, things like particularly groups like orthopedic surgeons, gastroenterologists, that do interventional work that, because of the technology nowadays, can be done on an outpatient as a day case basis. So really partnering with them, establishing an outpatient clinic combined with a small surgical suite that can perform the surgery as a day case. For example, an orthopedic group may have the ability to do anything from arthroscopy, total knee, even total hip replacement as a day case in a freestanding operating room suite. But then they can see patients, and then those cases that are too risky or bigger cases can be referred back to the mothership or the hub. So it's a true hub and spoke model, but in combination with the physician group. So it's a win-win situation. Chronic disease management obviously doesn't need a visit, frequent visits into the main hospital. Can be done on an outpatient basis, close to the community. Much better patient compliance and engagement if they have easier access, lower costs, and so on. Which leads to the next point, having centres within communities. Obviously, you can engage the community more proactively, and as we mentioned before, move away from sick care to preventive and wellness care. And of course, all this is possible because of technology. As I mentioned before, we would have dreamed of doing a day case total hip replacement when I was a medical student a number of years ago, but now the technology advancement in surgical technique enables us to do that. Endoscopies, gastroscopy, colonoscopies obviously can be done as a day case. Medication delivery methods are becoming, allowing us to do it less invasively. A lot of IVs can be shortened, can be converted to subcutaneous injections or even oral form. So all this can be done much more easily in the community, and not to mention moving forward things like home monitoring, wearable devices that can be put in patients' homes and then fed into a hub at the center of the community, can be monitored more closely than having it scattered everywhere and then fed into a big, complicated hospital. Yeah. Okay, next, please. So some of these examples, freestanding emergency rooms, standalone operating theatres that I mentioned. There's also a trend now towards micro hospitals. And then what I think Terence and Arthur were mentioning, so really making use of a true mixed-use development that incorporates residential, retail, hotel, and a medical facility beyond just the simple clinics that we're used to seeing in the big malls nowadays. Okay, next, please. So I'll just run through some examples. Sacred Heart building standalone ER, and down the bottom there, the CEO Tom Van Ostel said that it's really to move the care into the community to make it more convenient and accessible to folks rather than to having to come into the hospitals. Next. Again, building on the concept, expanding on the concept of the freestanding ERs, building on that. So the freestanding ERs are for consumers, patients to come in for an emergency room visit. If they can be treated good and well, and they can be sent home from the emergency room. But if they need admission, they would need to be transferred to the mothership, so to speak. But now what's happening is they're combining the freestanding ERs into micro hospitals. So 10 to 20 beds that allows for patients to be admitted as inpatients. They may encompass complex diagnostics up to a CT scan, endoscopy suite, even a minor operating suites, so they can truly operate as a micro hospital without really needing to refer patients back to the hub. And these can be built on very small footprints, 15, 20,000 square feet. And I think we have a couple of examples in the next couple of slides. One which is with the Baptist group based in San Antonio that I had been involved with a number of years ago. So they expanded their emergency rooms into a micro hospital. I think this particular one has 20 beds, inpatient beds, that allows for patients to be cared for under the one roof. Yep, next please. And then of course, moving on to the next trend that you heard about, which is mixed-use development, and why hospitals or beyond just simple clinics are a very good fit for the future. We go to the next slide. So malls making a comeback, and I think we all heard that large malls have been suffering in the recent past because of the online e-commerce platform. So what better way to utilize the spare capacity than backfilling it with medical centers? And beyond clinics, the next one is a project that I think you may have heard about, the Singapore Medical Center that AJT and Dr. Map have been involved in. I helped in a minor way, which is more than just a clinic. So this is a true, you can say a micro hospital almost within a mixed-use development that has retail, hotels, residential, and also this wellness center, which caters to everything from primary care, GP visits, to preventive health checkups, even endoscopy suites where gastroscopies, colonoscopies can be performed. Even neurosurgery in operating suites can be performed on site, and all the way through to the spectrum of preventive care and a wellness and aesthetic center. So this is, I think, a great example of the way towards the future in terms of mixed use, but also reaching into the community and also incorporating the full spectrum of medical care in the one center. Okay, next please. So having said that, the COVID-19 hit and reminded us all that the traditional bricks and mortars hospitals are not going anywhere. You go to the next slide. You may remember a couple of months ago in New York, all hospitals were mandated to increase their bed capacity by 100%, minimum of 50%, as COVID was rising in New York City, and people were scrambling to really fit in additional capacity in existing hospitals. Next, please. So as well as that, I think this one is built on the Wuhan Fangcheng model, which was a temporary large shelters, which were, I think in Wuhan, was catering more for the mild and moderately ill, more for isolation of COVID patients. But the UK went all out and built a full-on hospital that could cater to up to 2,000 ICU patients, fully ventilated, in an existing exhibition center within 2 weeks. So the flexibility and adaptability in the community that Terence was talking about, I think this is a great example. And next, please. And my last point is that, of course, we've been talking about shifting towards decentralization into the community, shift from sick care to wellness. But COVID is a great reminder for us that in our existing hospitals, they will continue to play a role in the future. They will get smaller in size, but the design of the hospitals around flexibility, adaptability, the ability to increase the capacity in a very short period of time. So things like neutral spaces, car parks, auditoriums, even waiting areas to be quickly converted into acute hospital beds. I think that will be well and truly in the planning for any hospital in the future. Okay, so thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, Dr. Nam. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. I think we had very good, exciting 3 speakers so far. Participants, please, we are running a bit overrun on our timing. So if you all could just give us another 20 to 30 minutes more, as Barry has been waiting here for the last 1 hour to be our last anchor speaker. So please, when you have your questions, kindly drop them into your Q&A box, and we will answer them immediately after Barry on Q&A. So Barry is from New Zealand. Barry has graduated in wellness and exercise and physio since 1996. And Barry has been traveling globally around the Asian region, taking leading roles in setting up medical wellness and spas. And now he is in a very exciting site, which is in Zhuhai, China, called the Surinsil Woods, which is a total mixed use. And we are very much involved with Barry in leading and working together in putting up this whole project. It consists of hotels, service apartments, a huge spa, and it's exercise and villas. Barry is a man leading the whole integrative wellness, and without people like Barry to put into a lifestyle model, it will be difficult. So Barry, all over to you. Please share your insight with us. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the introduction. So yeah, I've been working in this field for the last 20 odd years. And actually, Anthony, I calculated that we've known each other for the last 14. So time flies. So we've spoken a lot about investment, a lot about the bricks and mortar. I thought it would be interesting to run through how we start to pay those owners back their money and how we give our clients a result, and a couple of sort of case models of who's doing what around the world and at what price points. So in the 20 years that I've been working, I've worked with independent owners, I've worked with brands, and a lot of the times that I've gone in, I've inherited a pre-built space, or I've been involved in the layout of the space and getting those to maximize the revenues from the real estate that we have, and also increasing productivity of the staff. So one thing that I often inherit is when people have built these projects and they've added in a clinic and a spa and potentially fitness, they don't always integrate them that well. So one of the things that we do, or one of the things I do when I join a project or look at it, is really just break it down into what are the goals of this building. We talk about wellness, but wellness is a very generic term. And without taking specific goals, and we heard before the importance of sleep, the importance of exercise, the importance of disease control, the importance of nutrition, these all relate to what I call programming, and how we put these programs together, what staff we need, and what return of investment we can get. So one of the things that is very close to me is my background in exercise physiology. So when we put together a fitness retreat, I'm always looking at how we can give results. Our industry gets some criticism about not being necessarily scientific in its approach, or in ways that are not evidence-based. So these are case studies where we can show on a low investment model, or an existing resort that would like to introduce health programming or specific health retreat, how we can do that. So most hotel properties, resort properties already have gyms, they already have kitchens, they already have spas. And this little program is a 5-night stay where we can take an existing facility, introduce the programming, introduce the correct use of the facilities to get a customer an end result. Why is it important to get the results? Well, this creates the sustainability through the repeat business, but also it's advertising for word of mouth. And we use fitness because most people, especially after this lockdown period, may have gained a few extra pounds and are looking to shred those in a relatively quick process. So I'm not going to talk too much about diets, but of course these places have the ability to run a range of diets and a range of nutrition plans, not only for fitness, but even for disease. So getting diabetics to eat correctly is always important. So in this low-cost example, they are exercising, they're following a nutrition plan, and we're able to measure the fat loss and muscle gain through a Tanita or any scale that can measure body composition. An example of who does this quite well is the Absolute Group. They are not at a high price point, but they've got many multi-purpose facilities. They, of course, are focusing particularly on yoga, but this is an example of how you can add in programming to existing facilities. Staff requirements are relatively low, so the overheads are low and you can train a lot of people, so the profitability is high, and this is great for return of investment. As Anthony said, we're involved in a project here in China at the moment. China has been quite exciting, not just for this project, but recent events with COVID-19. So we're really taking into account how we can control the environment we're in, how we can show hygiene, and how we can really use this in our sales and marketing of our retreats. So in this example, similar fitness retreat, taking a lot more clues out of preventative medicine, so running blood panels to see where deficiencies are. If we find those deficiencies, we can easily correct them through things that were discussed earlier, either IVs or IV pushes. Here we have a greater ability to do fitness testing, a greater ability to do more personalized nutrition. And what this means is we're commanding a higher price point, but we're also able to diversify not just from a hotel point of view, but also the residents that are living on site. What we are finding that this is attractive for is people that are moving into semi-retirement, people that are wanting to take a wellness break, so sort of a few months off work to recuperate or optimize their health. In this planning of the facility, it is a mixed use, so we have the following layout. These members units are basically apartments. The facilities are all shared, and when you have an apartment, you have access to these facilities. The scope of the wellness towers is very diverse. So we are blending traditional Chinese medicine with Western medicine. We blend rehabilitation with nutrition, with holistic medicine. So the programming around these facilities give us a very diverse range and very easily attainable results for the customers, the members, and for the owner, it returns the return of investment, makes these programming important because the hardware has already been invested. This is a faster way for us to return the investment, meaning that hopefully, unlike the one standalone models, that these can be replicated time and time again, not just in China, but through the world, and especially focusing on that older, more disposable income target market. So being the anchor man, my role is to catch up the time. I've flown through that pretty quickly, but if there's any questions, please share them out there. And thank you, Anthony, for organizing today's event. If nothing else, I hope you learned something about programming and how quickly goals can be achieved in the right setting.
Well, Barry, thank you very much. I know you got a tough job there, putting that whole estate up in fitting everything integratively and cohesively, and to make sure that it's sustained, and especially in this current crisis. But I'm very sure the ownership and yourself has the right way of doing it collectively. Well, there are a couple of questions coming in. First, we will have one of this question. Please, with your question, please throw it in the quick Q&A box. Our co-host at the back of the scene, Alex, will be penning it down for us. So let's take the first question. I think this one will fit very well for Arthur. While we have heard that many of the Thai developers may have to take haircuts, hefty haircuts, many of them are those of us who are hospitality, knew of many were at risk well before the COVID, and many of these sale prices were expected to be generated by locals holding to offload on competition just in 1997. Can we expect the government there to seriously open up the unrealistic restriction that limit foreign investors, whether to leisure or to residential hotels?
Well, I've been living in Thailand for over 30 years, and I have learned one thing, and that is not to rely on the government. So I think you need to plan for, unfortunately, for restrictive land ownership or residential ownership. You know, the 49%, the building can be owned by a foreigner or land, and 51% by a Thai partner. I mean, there are leases, they talk about leases being longer from 30 to 50 years potentially. And also, you know, there are board of investment privileges for certain hospitality projects. But I think when you have at a time like this, when there is more supply than demand, certainly in terms of hotels, then I think it's unlikely the government will give privileges to a new hotel to be built. So, I mean, there are creative ways to not skirt, but to mitigate foreign ownership regulations. And obviously, the Thai government talks about being very proactive and being open to foreign investment. So, yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath for any changes, but I think there are ways to work around it.
Thank you, thank you. Well, another question. This will be coming in basically for Terence. Just 1 second. Question is, Terence, what are examples of non-acute healthcare spaces that can be co-located within a community? Terence, I think you're mute. You're mute, Terence.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that. Okay, the list is actually quite long. Top of my list actually is things that are minimally invasive or less invasive. So, you know, thinking more along the lines of day clinics or day surgeries, health and wellness spaces, follow-up care or step-down healthcare as well. And specifically, these refer to things like, you know, aesthetic clinics, dermatological clinics, endo suites, radiology, diagnostics, weight management, lifestyle management, sports clinics, that sort of thing. Okay. The list is really very long. I think Dr. Nam mentioned a few others as well. Okay, I think it's up to professionals, healthcare professionals, real estate professionals, and also architects to figure out how best to weave in this long list of spaces into communities, because each will have, I think, slightly different requirements, how they link up with the rest of the community spaces. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Terence. Well, there's a question here looking at Indonesia. So I think the best person for me to ask this question will be you, Dr. Nam. Thailand seems to have a lot of strong investment in wellness properties. Do you find similar sentiments in Indonesia?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anthony. The question is yes and no. I think yes, in terms of more aesthetic dermatology type freestanding clinics in certain pockets of Indonesia, certainly in South Jakarta, where there's a lot of expats and more affluent population. There's a lot of more freestanding physiotherapy and exercise type facilities. And certainly in the tourist destinations, you have a lot of these popping up, a lot of these more integrated wellness and aesthetic clinics. But I haven't seen any large chains or large hospital chains that have tried to branch off into this area yet. But I think it's definitely coming and probably going to be accelerated by what we're going through now. Post-pandemic, people are going to be paying more and more attention to their preventive health and wellness. So in short, it's more pockets, standalone dermatologists, cosmetic, aesthetic types, a few semi-integrated types in resort destinations like Bali, but the big hospitals haven't really spun off into this area yet.
No, not yet. Don't you think that will be coming soon?
I think it will be coming, like I said.
Yeah.
It's starting with the checkup, the more comprehensive checkup, platinum checkup, but I think the move into true wellness, integrated wellness is the next step.
Well, hang on to the mic there. You've got a pretty good friend coming in from Indonesia. As we know, in US, there are ASC, ambulatory service centers, which are not popular yet in Indonesia. Would after COVID such clinics be growing increasingly in Indonesia?
I think ASC, if I assume correctly, would be ambulatory surgical clinics, so freestanding operating theatres that I mentioned. Certainly not popular yet in Asia. People would still, the feeling, the sentiment would be they want to go to a main hospital and see the specialists, all the specialists under the one roof, say their cardiologist, the endocrinologist, the internist is there. But interesting question post-COVID, because now we're saying we're seeing the main hospitals are being locked down, it's even semi-elective surgeries being postponed or cancelled. So the concept of a freestanding surgical centre where you can do totally isolate, do preventive testing and screening of the staff and the incoming patients would possibly allow for elective surgeries to continue. So it's a very interesting question and interesting concept whether this behaviour, particularly in this part of the world, is going to change.
Oh, why is it not so in Asia? Why Asia is not able to basically do what US have this for the ASC?
I think it's more the consumer behaviour and expectation. They still very much tie to having operation as going to a big hospital, having all the bells and whistles, all the specialists there that can potentially treat them if something goes wrong. But as I mentioned, very popular now in the US and Europe, where the surgeons would make the call as to which cases they deem safe and be able to do as a day case, and then do it, and the throughput and the outcome is just as good. And everything, the complications, the infection rates, remobilization rates are much better in selected patients, obviously, in an outpatient setting. And you take away this risk of intercontamination with things like COVID as well.
Thank you, Dr. Nam. I hope, Angus, that was your question. I hope Dr. Nam did give you the right question right answer to your question, sorry. Another one that's coming up mainly on investment here, I think this goes to Arthur. As a follow-up ability of scaling up wellness, scalability is more often linked to highly restricted ownership and freehold issues to international investors. Is it time to give more balanced government approach to the international capital?
Yeah, I think that's sort of from Kevin.
Yeah, that's from Kelvin. Yeah.
Kevin, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it goes in with my last comment. I think, I don't think that waiting for government intervention is going to, or opening up is going to change very quickly. So I think one has to deal with the circumstances on the ground as they are. But as I said, it is an issue in terms of scaling out wellness properties and for investment and making so we can put enough money to work. But as I say, there are ways to achieve that, and I'm happy on a private basis to share some ideas with you.
Yeah, thank you. So please put your questions in. We got tons coming in here now, more and more questions. So please fill in your questions. If we can't take it, we will put another 5 minutes to this. So there's a question here for Barry. Barry, since you're in China, from Jordan Street, what do you think of wellness properties in China, particularly in health and wellness sector?
Well, what I've seen in China is there is a tendency to invest very heavily into this sector. But what we seem to be lacking is the operational experience. So there's a property that I was involved with just over a year and a half ago. The investment is really top of the range. The facilities that have been installed in there was no expense spared. The challenge that they are having is marketing what they are doing and attracting the markets. And I think China is a very diverse market. We are very different in our tier 1 cities to our tier 3 cities. The traditional treatments that do well are hot springs and existing traditional Chinese medicine arrangements connected to a leisure facility. So if it's like TCM and golf, it does much better than if it's just a standalone TCM retreat. If it's a hot spring that also has a spa, it's performing better than just a standalone hot spring. So I think it's a very diverse space. I think there's a lot of quality, and there's certainly a lot more coming with AJT helping with this project here that I'm involved with. But I still think there's a lot of space for growth and a lot more professional therapists and staff that need to get into this industry. It's still very much growing.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. But Terence, I believe Swan and McCarran is doing a couple of major projects in China as well in terms of health and wellness. Do you have some insight things that you would like to share with our participant?
I can't speak too much about them because one of them I think is in the early stages of design. That's in Xiamen. It's only recently kicked off, so I think some of the things we're not supposed to be speaking about in the public forum just yet. But we have about 3 or 4. We're wrapping up one. We did one in Shanghai. That's more or less wrapped up. We're doing one in Xi'an. Okay, and they range in size from a few hundred to high hundreds bed count. Okay, but I can't share too many details. But happy to share what I can later on. Okay, offline if anyone's interested.
Please join our WhatsApp group, and that's where we will carry on our friendship and networking, and your answers will all be replied individual by individual speakers. Well, but for sure, China is a growing market. We see a lot of potential in China. We get a lot of inquiries coming through our offices, people asking for us for advisory, building a whole integrative health screening, wellness, and basically moving even much more into labs and laboratories for stem cells. And the whole works. China basically has the energy and the live bloodstream of putting up a big establishment there. Another question came in. Well, this is something that, well, I hope I'm answering it correctly. There's a news of Lululemon came in and basically purchased Mirror, acquiring Mirror. Do you think there are more retail brands following, taking on health fitness tax on bringing more reach and engagement? Anybody would like to take this question, Barry? Or, well, I don't know. Dr. Nam, what do you think? Many of these people are coming in to buy more retail brands and moving into healthcare and wellness.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the trend, again, accelerated by current circumstances right now. And I think you shared with me the example of Walmart now, sort of integrating almost a full spectrum micro hospital in some of their larger stores. And they started off with labs and 5-minute consults and so on, but now they have fixed price consults with family practitioners and even specialists. And of course, they have the ability to do lab, simple diagnostics, and dispense medication. So that's a natural fit for them. But I'm guessing this one is also capitalizing on the brand for exercise clothing and incorporating a fitness center. It seems like a very reasonable trend that has a lot of potential.
Yeah. What do you think, Arthur?
I don't think that gyms and fitness, unfortunately, are top of people's wish list at the moment. I think that certainly in the UK, I'm not sure about Thailand, but they are still deemed to be smaller spaces and a lot of sweaty, hot bodies, and therefore potentially being issues for the spread of the virus. Frankly, I think that's a wrong approach. I think that actually people need fitness and they need to exercise. And I think the sooner we get these gyms open up, the better. I think the bigger problem is that places that rely on their businesses being in indoor spaces, in restaurants, fitness centers in particular, then how do you make a decent return on your investment? How do you remain profitable when you have to reduce your capacity from, by 50, 60%? I think that's a big problem. But again, on the e-commerce side, there's a stock called Peloton, which is a cycle fitness which you do online and has done amazingly well during COVID. So I think anything with exercise which you can do virtually, I think is still going to be something with us in the future.
Thank you. I think we are totally running out of time, which is very good. But one last question. Well, this of course involved the money person here sitting on my left. Arthur, do you have investment opportunities that you can share privately?
Well, I would be delighted to do that, and thank you very much for Anthony to invite me here. Yeah, I'd be more than delighted to share our thoughts and ideas. And we are active in the market, and particularly in brownfield, and very happy to share those ideas with you.
Thank you everybody for being here today in our third webinar. We have our fourth one up and coming that is scheduled on the 10th, but because on the 10th Singapore is going into polling day, election and selections, so two of our speakers are coming in from Singapore on that day. So it looks like we have to make some change and shifts on our date on home healthy and residential space, so home wellness. It will be a very good topic. We got 5 interesting speakers. We have also doctors on board. So look out on our new dates, but very most likely it will be on the 15th of July, right? 15th of July. It's confirmed now, 15th of July. Fantastic. So before we basically call it a day here, dear speakers, thank you for all your time. Dr. Nam, Arthur, Barry in China, 谢谢你. Singapore, thank you. But before we call it a day, can each of you give a take-home message? Barry, starting for you in Chinese.
You want it to be very short then. Look, I think we're in an exciting space. I think COVID has taught us a lot about looking after our health rather than managing diseases. I think the appetite of the consumer to get involved in their own elements of health and being able to track these and know where they are is going to be post-COVID a new normal. So I think it's a great space to be in, and I only see positive things coming forward.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Terence, how about you from Singapore? What's your takeaway of sustainability? And you have the deep knowledge of putting things all together.
Well, just speaking of the cuff here, I think the current situations that we're in right now, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We should take advantage of the opportunity right now to rethink how we're approaching a whole lot of things. Okay, look at them with fresh eyes. Sustainability is going to be very important for any kind of development moving forward. I think even more so now. So the thing about it is maybe we shouldn't be thinking about sustainability just in terms of like what the measures are that we can put in, like photovoltaic panels and things like that. But even just how we reimagine the building, how we reimagine a function fitting in within a community, within an existing building, within a campus, for example. Kind of like breaking the old models and thinking afresh. Okay. The virus is throwing all sorts of new things at us, and we need to react differently as well. Okay, how we react to sustainability is just one of those things.
Thank you, Terence. Dr. Nam, what's your take-home message? You've got a lot of supporters out there.
Well, firstly, thanks very much, Anthony, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I've learned a lot from my co-speakers. I'll just echo what Barry and Terence just said, that we are definitely in interesting times. It's scary, it will pass, but it presents us with an opportunity on how we, as healthcare providers in different fields, can help the general population to, now that their awareness has been raised, how can we help them with our technology, with the, you know, sort of the new developments, new concepts in thinking? How can we help people be healthier, stay well, and stop them from getting diseases, whatever, in the future? So I think it presents a great opportunity and challenge for us as well.
Thank you, Dr. Nam. So, Mr. Moneyman, what's your take-home message?
My message is very short and sweet. I would just say, unfortunately, the crisis is with us, but I think we need to stay positive and optimistic. And, you know, as I say, from crisis there is always opportunity. I mean, it's a very tragic that we're going through this situation, but yeah, get up in the morning and see to fight the battles and stay positive.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Please, to my take-home message is always stay safe, stay healthy, keep your inner health, immunity up. Look upon each other for good assistance, lifestyle, exercise, and not forgetting to listen to our next webinar, which is basically on healthy homes and healthy homes, residential space, and condominium. So thank you all. Thank you very much to everybody and to all our speakers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.